Like it worked, Ted.
We are live.
Hey everyone, we're going to get started in just about a few seconds, actually. Ted, are you still there?
Yes, we're live.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Anything else I need to do on my end?
Nope, everything's
Okay.
good.
Okay. We'll wait just maybe a minute. I'm just looking at, looks like we got almost everyone on. I also have a gnat in my office, so if you see me doing this a lot, sorry about that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. It's 10:01. Welcome, guys. Sorry, you see a black screen because I'm going to play a video, so I've got it all teed up. Thank you guys. We are through using the Zoom for the members, and then this is being live streamed. Is that the right word? From our YouTube channel, and it will be available there. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Nikki, do you want to start us off with roll call?
Yeah.
Great.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nikki Hinkle, and I am the president of South Office of Indiana. First we have is Megan Berger, Sean Felton,
I'm Megan Berger. I'm representing South Advocates of Indiana.
I'm Sean Fulton, the Education and Training Coordinator for the ARC of Indiana.
Katie Stafford.
You're on mute, Katie.
Good morning, Katie Stafford Cunningham with NR.
Karen Berman.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Karen Berman. I am the CEO and one of the founders of IPMG, Case Management Company.
Kate Burrow.
Hello, Kate's not in. This is Desiree Island from GCPD. I am filling in for Kate today. Good morning.
Hello. Desiree, were you the one that said I am on the chat?
No, that's actually not me.
Oh, okay. That might have been Megan. Someone just chatted that they were on. So just let us know who it might have been. Megan.
I am, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Megan. Just want to make sure we didn't miss the person who chatted us.
All good.
Okay.
Kim Dobson.
Good morning. I'm Kim Dodson with the ARC of Indiana. Good to see everyone.
Betta DeWeese.
Hi, everyone. Betta DeWeese here with Stonebell. Glad to be here with you.
Rick Thompson.
Good morning. Rick Thompson, MSDC.
Kelly Hartman. Melissa Keys.
Melissa's here from Indiana Disability Rights.
Amy Griffin. Derek Norn.
Good morning, everyone. Derek Nord, Indiana Institute on Disability and Community.
Lisa Paddock.
Good morning, everyone. Lisa Paddock with InSource.
Gloria Springer.
Loretta Springer, parent advocate.
And Kelly Mitchell.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Kelly Mitchell, Director for the Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services. Good to be here.
Thank you. I think that's it, right, Nikki?
Yeah, down your asses was staff.
Sorry about that. What'd you say?
That was it besides staff members.
Oh, okay. You can go ahead if you want to check who those folks are that are here. I think actually most people are here, but.
Okay. Kathy Robertson.
Here, good morning. Kathy Robinson, Associate Director for DDRS.
Jessica Harlan York.
Here.
Kyle Ingren.
Hi. Here.
Matt Rodway. Holly Insmith. Teresa, I don't know her last name.
Good morning, Teresa Colazar.
Christine Conson. And then I think it's Ashton. I don't know the last name.
Morning. This is Brian Gilbert with Office of Medicaid Policy and Planning. I'm here for Ashton.
That's it.
And Kelly Hartman just came in.
Oh, hey, Kelly. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. I'm going to switch my screen. We're going to start off how we usually do with an open futures learning video. This is, I was trying to find a good one the other day and this one stuck out to me. So it's called A Sense of Achievement. And it focuses on really not just looking at the first couple minutes or seconds, especially about people having goals, but really looking at what are your achievements and for everyone, not just folks with disabilities. So I'm going to share this. It should work.
All right, achievements are very important. We're very focused on goals in this field. Oh, are you working on your goal? Well, let's analyze the task. And every year we say, you're going to do your cooking goal again, or whatever goal it is. To me, that constant focus on goal kind of gives an underlying message like something's wrong with you and you better be working on yourself. You better fix it. You know, not like you're a cool person and you're good enough, but more like, hey, we got to keep working on this. What's your goal? We're working on your goal today. I'd rather celebrate achievements. And Martin Seligman says that a sense of achievement is a really critical part of happiness. So I had this one woman, she used to call 911 all the time because she loved going to the hospital. And her mom was nice enough to give her a cell phone. So that made it easy. 911, I want to kill myself. And then so at one point we wrote a behavior plan where we took the phone away. That was a mistake because it became like just a game. She got really good at getting phones. Like she went and banged on the neighbor's door. Do you mind if I use your phone? Oh, sure, honey. 911. I need to go to the hospital. I want to kill myself. So she just found ways around it. And, you know, really her life wasn't rich enough and she wasn't happy enough. So we're like, you know what? She needs to be happier and we need to find ways that she can help other people, ways that she can do things that are meaningful for her. But, you know, one day I realized that we had gone 3 weeks without her calling 911. Now that doesn't seem like a long time, but it was significant. So we had a little party in my office and we celebrated the achievement. It was not a reward, it was a celebration. I had another guy who used to break TVs all the time. We realized he had gone 6 months without breaking a TV. We celebrated it. We had a party. Achievements. Everybody needs a sense of achievement. Everybody needs to feel good about something. And maybe we need to redefine what an achievement is. An achievement can be not breaking a TV for 6 months or not calling 911 for 3 weeks. And she kept going and kept doing better. She started a hobby. She also started helping this other individual. And her life got really good. We were actually able to eventually have a real party, got the company credit card and went to Red Lobster and celebrated a whole year of her not calling 911. And you know what she did right after that? She called 911. It's always the way. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But she ended up actually getting a job, doing really well. And she hasn't called 911 for a long, long time because her life has become meaningful and she celebrates her achievements.
Okay, thank you guys. Sorry, I found that one and we talk a lot about that here, just how goals, it's not that we all don't have goals, but sometimes, I don't know about you, but I don't constantly, sit down and always, visit my goals and it's not the same goal every single year. So anyway, I just thought I liked that video and I thought it hit home. So, okay. Anyone have anything? I know Kelly, I think you just clapped maybe, or I don't know if you raised your hand, but.
No, I clapped. I think it's just so important to think about how we look at things. And I love that concept of celebrating achievements rather than rewarding or taking away. And
well, and I like that she was even saying she laughed. I mean, but right, they went. She had to step back, right? She called 911,
but it's okay. We all do, right?
It's okay. You know what I mean? I think that was sort of not to make fun of it, but I think just sort of to say, hey, you know what? We had to step back and we'll move forward. So and it happens.
Thank you for sharing that. I think great way to start the day.
Okay, I am going to just give me 1 second here, find the PowerPoint. There we go. Okay. All right. We are going to get started here. I'm going to move my screen. Good thing I have two screens because this takes a little bit of a second. Okay. So welcome again to our November meeting. Again, we always start, as you guys know, all people are empowered to live, love, work, learn, play, and pursue their dreams is our vision. And we start every meeting, just to remind us and center us and make sure that everything we're doing points toward this vision. So here's the agenda today. Obviously, we are in the first part of the agenda. We're going to have Teresa Colazar is here to present a BRS update. From BEADS and DDRS. Kathy Robinson is going to share some information about the transition and waiver amendments. Kyle is going to share. I promised Kyle we're going to give him time. He's not going to get cut off, so we have to stick to it. So I might have to cut some people off, but he's going to give us an update on the DDRS systems transformation that we've talked about many times, and then we will conclude. We might even get done a little bit early. I don't know. We'll see, but. Happy Thanksgiving. Teresa, I'll do your slides if you're okay with that. And I can monitor the chat. And sometimes it's hard to do both, but since you're talking, I think I should be able to handle it.
Jessica, I will help you as well. I'll monitor the chat if you're awesome. Handling the slides.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. Yes, that would be great. I'll just chat here and try to keep an eye out as well. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. Let me move our pictures here. Okay, so this content, the topic areas here will look somewhat familiar. This is very similar fashion to updates that I've been reporting out the last maybe year or so, maybe a little over a year. And then I've got a few additional updates at the end. So these initial few slides will look somewhat familiar. So first up is a status of our effort to fill our vocational rehabilitation counselor vacancies. This just keeps getting better. We're thrilled with our current retention rates of our 200 counselor positions. Only about 2.5%, which is 5 positions right now, are vacant, or as of November 1, we're vacant. Of course, we're proceeding to fill all of those. And then the other metric that we look at to gauge our overall retention is the number of new counselors that we have. So again, as of November 1, 22 VR counselors who are in trainee status. That generally means they've been with us less than a year. And so their position turned over, within the last year or so, and that represents 11% of positions. So when we look at those two together, vacancy rate 2.5%, but overall kind of annual retention rate or turnover rate rather, around 13.5%. Next slide. A status report of the order of selection as of November 1st, still true today. Both 1 and 2 categories are open and category 3 remains closed. Those categories, if you're not familiar, are based on an eligible person's level of severity, which assigns them to a priority category 1, 2, or 3, with 1 being those with the highest need or the most significant experience of disability. So category 1 has always been open. Those folks have never gone on a wait list. Category 2 was closed up until July of this year, and then it opened. And now again, category 3 is the only category closed. So what does that mean for folks coming in the door? It means 98% of eligible individuals are not put on a wait list in VR at this point in time. So only about 2% of eligible folks are assigned to that priority category 3 and going to that wait list. We've continued to release people or pull people off of that wait list and offer services. We've done 11 of those releases to date, with over 3,500 eligible folks moving off of the wait list. I've got some data here on the status of the first 10 of those 11 releases. Number 11 was just done last month, so we're still in that call outs, trying to get more folks reached. So for the first 10 releases, which takes us through the July release, 28% ended up in services or have already been served. And of those, some have already actually exited with employment. About 17% received services and exited with employment. 21%, we reached them And they ultimately said they didn't need services or didn't want services. They declined services. There were 38% that we could not reach. We do multiple outreach attempts, at least 5, using different ways to reach out. And so these were folks who we just couldn't reach or got returned or, unanswered calls, emails, texts, etc. And then 12% we reached and were closed for other reasons. So they maybe have moved or have retired, incarcerated. It could be, there's medical issues. It could be a variety of reasons. Right. Next slide. Continue to update on the status of order of selection. I think I covered this. There's a little graphic here for those that like that kind of visual look. You can, if you can not see that, I'll explain that here. Again, in July, we opened priority category 2, which meant we started to move people off of the category 3 wait list in October, and we'll continue to do that as we work our way out of the order of selection, which we anticipate happening before the end of calendar year 2024. Next slide. The third item here is the number of individuals who've applied to VR. In state fiscal year 23, we had 5,208 new VR applicants. That was up a bit, about 10% from state fiscal year 2022, where we had 4,740, and also up just a little bit. 22 was up a little bit from 21 as well. But really, that's a pretty significant increase, 10% increase in applicants between state fiscal year 22 and 23. We're really projecting that increase to continue in terms of seeing another potentially 10% increase this next year as we continue through and get to the end of state fiscal year 24. The trend looks like it's continuing in terms of that increase, probably due largely to we're getting out that order selection is nearing the end, and that another category has opened, as well as some targeted outreach we've been doing with schools that may be driving more folks in. We're trying to convert more of those pre-ETS cases into VR cases. So there's certainly much more we could do to be more intentional with outreach, but some of it's kind of naturally happening just with those couple of initiatives. And of course, we're being mindful of our staffing capacity and balancing that to figure out the degree of outreach that seems right. I also like to give you pre-ETS data here. So we had 3,819 new pre-ETS applicants in 23, and that also was up, not as much, but up about 1.3% from pre-ETS applicants the prior year. Okay, next slide. Item 4 here, the number of individuals who are currently on a wait list. As of November 1st, 758. Of course, those are all in priority category 3. Most of those folks have been on that wait list for some time. There's only 24 of those 758 that are new to the wait list since the beginning of this state fiscal year, July 1. And then the number receiving services, my caveat always here, my disclaimer is always, this is a snapshot. It is not reflective of the total number of individuals receiving services over the course of any time frame, a month, a quarter, a year. This is just simply a snapshot in time of who is active, who has a service plan in place. So it doesn't include applicants. It doesn't include people eligible but don't have a service plan yet. Does not include pre-ETS. It does not include people on the wait list. Okay, so that snapshot of actively receiving services under individual plan for employment as of November 1, 9,457. This is a 5.6% increase over the previous update. I think I shared an update in July or August. And at that time, the snapshot was 8956. So again, up about 5.5%. And then to give you just a picture of the total number of folks that we might serve in a year, for those coming into VR and getting to the point where they have a service plan and are actively receiving one or more services, there were 12,660 during the last state fiscal year. That was up 4% from the total who received services the prior year. And again, that number does not include pre-ETs. That we've been serving around 8,000 individuals who are potentially eligible in pre-ETs but are not in the VR system. So when you combine those numbers, around 20,000 folks are receiving whether either pre-ETs or VR services each year. Next slide. And then I just have a few additional updates. Probably most of the folks on the call are already familiar with this new and exciting initiative. Oh, let me pause. I think there's a question. Sean is asking, how long does it take from the time someone puts in an application to get an interview to get a job? Okay, and is it taking too long? And that's why people declined. So folks that declined coming into services from the wait list, this wouldn't necessarily be that reason, because they've been sitting on a wait list maybe for a year, maybe for a few years, and think something has changed and they don't want services anymore. But on another note, when someone comes into VR, we are generally seeing about a 30-day turnaround from application to eligibility, and then about another 30-day turnaround from eligibility to service plan. By law, we have 150 days to go from application to service plan, which is frankly too long, right? To have someone come in and wait 150 days to get a service. So we're trying to do that more rapidly. We've had some success with more rapid eligibility determinations, and then trying to get those IPE or individual plan for employments done pretty much right away, at least doing a general IPE first meeting with someone, and then we can tweak it and refine it later. Now, sometimes that may still feel too long to folks because we live in the world of Amazon Prime where we can have something on our doorstep at 5 a.m., right? So that is still potentially feels like a long time for some individuals. And then from there, if we're purchasing services, I think you're all aware there are some vendor capacity challenges that we're facing. So there can sometimes be a waiting period there, whether it's for something like driver's training, right, or medical appointments, or to get glasses or hearing aids, or employment services. There is sometimes a wait, just depending on where that vendor is right now with their staffing. So you're right, Sean. Sometimes it does feel like people may feel like things are taking too long. That's probably a whole other conversation. We're working on some things to address that. But I'm going to circle back to get through the slides here to keep, I'm going to keep on Jessica's timeline here. So performance incentive payments for our employment service providers were implemented in July, so just a few months back. This is exciting. We're really looking forward to seeing how this pans out. I won't go into great detail again because I want to be cognizant of time, and I think a lot of folks on the line already have this information. But I did want to share a little bit of a kind of an initial outcome, if you will, of what we're seeing in terms of the utilization of these incentive payments. So the idea here is that we're really focused on having, seeing more individuals coming through our doors, get to the point of employment, and hopefully raising the bar to some degree on the quality of those employment outcomes, the wage level, the amount of hours people are working, whether they're employer offered healthcare benefits. We're always going to have folks who want to start very entry level, and that's fine. I keep saying there's a seat at the table for everyone, right? But we think there's more folks who could be accessing those higher paying, more hours, more benefits. There's more folks who could be accessing jobs that offer that than maybe what we're seeing. So we're providing some additional funding on top of our, the screen changed, Jessica. We're providing some additional funding on top of our regular employment services payments and milestones to provide that financial incentive to providers when that job outcome reaches a certain hourly wage level, hourly work hours, and provider offered healthcare. So for level 1, that is that the job outcome met one of those, any one of those. So the wage, the hour, the healthcare threshold. Level 2 is that the job checked 2 of those boxes. And then level 3 is that all 3 of those incentive criteria were met. So for level 1, we've already authorized, just since July, 17 of these payments based on people's placement information. And so far, 8 of those have been billed and paid. For level 2, we've authorized 19, and 8 of those have been billed and paid. And then for level 3, again, 17 authorized and 10 of those paid. So we're seeing some decent utilization here just within the first quarter of implementation. Hopefully this is going to pick up even more. But I did want to share, we've gotten some questions on the utilization. So I did want to share where we were as of the end of October. Okay, next slide. Something else I may have mentioned the last time I shared an update is that we had a federal monitoring visit from the Rehabilitation Services Administration, or RSA, back in May. They were on site for 3 full long days. It was actually we felt fairly good about the visit as they left, but didn't really know what the outcome would be until at the end of September, we received our draft report. And we were thrilled that there were no compliance findings. We knew we had a lot of stuff in good shape, but we never anticipated that we would get through an RSA monitoring without findings. This is personally my 3rd experience with a monitoring, and there have been ample findings in prior years. So we were very, very thrilled with that. There were, however, several recommendations and some what I keep referring to as strongly worded recommendations. And I just wanted to quickly share some of those recommendations, or really a very high level summary of all of those recommendations with you. Now, a lot of these we are very, very much contemplating, and some of these align with our goals and our priorities already. So of course, those are things that fit really well for us. And then there may be other things here that we'll just have to see where they fall out in terms of the priority list. So there might be a couple here that we ultimately, thank you for your recommendation. We'll revisit, when we can create some space. But there's many things here that we're actually already making some traction on. So just briefly, recommendations centered around a need to increase the number of pre-ETS students who ultimately come into VR. We're only seeing about 10% of pre-ETS students in a given year who come into VR in that same year. Now, when we look across a broader time frame, maybe like a 2 or 3 year period, it gets to closer to about 18, 19% of those served in pre-ETS ultimately come into VR. There's no target that is established for us to aim toward, but when we look at those percentages of pre-ETS students who come into VR, we are on the lower end nationally. And really, I think it's a little bit of a missed opportunity not to have some of those folks continue services as they come in, coming into VR, to continue to see them through to placement. So we already had that goal internally to increase the number of pre-ETS students who apply to VR. Assess our staffing needs. The feds, and we could not agree more, want to make sure that as we end the order of selection and do some ramping up with some targeted outreach, that we're always cognizant of our staffing capacity and that we're balancing that. And if there are additional staffing needs, that we're figuring out how to accomplish that. Implementing strategies to improve provider capacity. Certainly that should be a recommendation already on our radar. Hopefully people have seen we've already tried to do some things to mitigate some of that, but there is quite a bit more work to do to see some improved capacity there. Some service code alignments. There's a lot of service codes, many of you know that, and the feds had some recommendations of how we can maybe realign some service codes to better reflect what their interpretation is with corresponding codes at the federal level. And so one In particular, that if you do employment services, you're seeing or going to be seeing is separating our milestone payments back into 2 sets of milestones, same rate, same services, but they want us to separately track those services for those individuals in supported employment from those individuals not in supported employment. So we're not going back to a tier 1, tier 2, like we had in RBF, not doing that. It's really just a service code. That's the only change you'll see, just so we can separately track who received milestones as a supported employment service and who received, milestones not as a supported employment service. And then opportunities to generate non-federal match. At the federal level, there's a lot of attention right now on returned dollars. And so we were able to get some technical assistance from RSA when they were here on some things that we already were working toward, but getting some specific questions answered on appropriate ways to enter into third-party agreements and interagency agreements to generate some collaborations and potential match for the program. Reviewing our post-secondary funding determination, something else that RSA is paying a lot of attention to right now nationally is seeing if there are ways to use more VR dollars to support people in post-secondary training. So they didn't have a concern with any of our processes, but encouraged us to look to see if there might be some different ways that would support more people attending post-secondary training. So that is something we are looking at because we do have in our state plan that's coming up, one of our specific priorities is just that. It is around increasing enrollment of VR participants in credential-bearing training. So we're very interested in looking at kind of doing a fresh look at our funding process there. We've already done some budget estimates on some possible scenarios. So more to come on that. And then increasing participant wages, more focus on career pathways, and again, enrollment in post-secondary training. So the incentive payments that I just mentioned are one small strategy to doing that, but certainly a lot more work in front of us there. And then we didn't have any findings around policies. We had all of our policies, but they had some recommendations to just make some more robust or enhancements to a lot of those administrative policies. All right, next slide. And then I briefly mentioned we have a new state plan due in the spring. And so we'll be going out for public comments. December or January is the tentative timeline. We are really part of the state plan. The VR section is one component of a larger statewide workforce plan. So we are collaborating with a lot of other folks on this state plan and, just kind of on board, piggybacking off of their public comment process. So we will have that public comment period, like I said, probably December, maybe even into January when that comes out for public comment. We have 2 primary goals that we're establishing for the next 2 years and several priorities under each goal. But the goals are really centering around improving participant engagement and improving outcomes. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. But as we looked at all of the initiatives and all of the needs that we feel we have right now, it really comes down to keeping people engaged and reducing, that attrition or people leaving the system, and certainly improving outcomes. We're also nearing our next comprehensive statewide needs assessment. State plan we do every 2 years. Needs assessment we do every 3 years. There were some listening sessions this month that maybe some of you, there were some listening sessions this month with our staff, and then we'll have listening sessions coming up with our service providers. So that information will be coming out. We're working with Public Consulting Group to help us structure and perform the needs assessment. So as a kind of a third party, neutral party, they'll be conducting those listening sessions on what's working well, what's not working so well. There'll also be, you may remember from prior assessment years, a survey that goes out very broadly to individuals, to their families, to businesses, stakeholders, staff, etc. We will be having a survey come out likely sometime in 2024 And the target completion here of all of the feedback, a lot of looking at data and then ultimately setting priorities based on what the feedback in the data tells us. All of that is to be completed by January of 2025. Sounds kind of far away, but again, the feedback sessions are starting. So wanted to put that out there in case you see that information come or are interested in participating. And I think that may be it, unless there are other questions.
It looks like Teresa, Sean had a question, some kudos on no findings with only recommendations from Karen and Lisa. And then Sean said, how many people are wanting to start their own business versus other kinds of jobs, or what are people going for the most?
Yeah, I don't have a number in my head on that. We definitely support folks in self-employment endeavors. In fact, we have a dedicated VR staff member who is able to provide technical assistance on self-employment, small business outcomes. She also provides technical assistance on home modifications, vehicle modifications, and farm modifications. Those 4 services are things that aren't necessarily everyday kind of experiences for our counselors. And so, unlike something like supported employment, right, or transportation or training, lots and lots of folks receive those kinds of services. Counselors could probably rattle off those protocols in their sleep. But when it comes to those things that aren't accessed by as many folks, it can be difficult for a counselor to retain, all of the right processes and protocols for those kinds of things, right? And so we have a technical support person who is called upon and intervenes in those kind of situations, to make sure that we're carrying things out appropriately. So I don't necessarily have a number. That is a data point we collect, so we could likely pull that. But we definitely support people with self-employment endeavors. Now there is some work there, right? I mean, we do want to make sure that it's a business that's going to be fruitful for the individual and is a good fit for them, just as we would any other desired employment outcome that someone has. So we also partner often with entities like SCORE or portals. We do a lot of work with portals on self-employment feasibility kinds of activities and getting the recommendations on what would be some initial steps. So we've got some good resources in place to help people with self-employment opportunities.
Thanks, Teresa. Doesn't look like there's any more questions or anything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along to Kathy Robinson.
Thanks, Jessica. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well. I have some waiver amendment updates I'm going to be sharing, really just to kind of summarize where we are right now in our waiver transition process. Holly and Holly Wimsatt, the BEADS director, and Heather Dane would normally provide this update. They are at NASDS this week, so I am just going to walk through kind of what's happening in the BEADS world as it relates to some of the waiver transition work and talk through the proposed amendments that are currently out for public comment. So just as a reminder, hopefully this slide looks a little bit familiar. We've been on a path for a while, primarily to draft amendments for a lot of our waivers. For those of you who may not recall, most of you hopefully do. This is in alignment with the FSSA's Pathways for Aging project to implement and manage care waiver structure for the 60+ population who are who meet that nursing facility level of care. I'm not going to talk a lot about pathways this morning, but I will point to some places where you can find some more information if you're interested in learning about pathways. The timelines for everything that you see and what I'm going to talk about really align with pathways and their implementation timeline, so that all of these changes and adjustments can really occur in sync and alignment together This has been a very highly coordinated effort across FSSA in order to stage these amendments. And so you're going to hear people talking about 1915C and B waivers a lot, particularly as it relates to pathways. And those are just fancy ways of saying we're going to operate a home and community-based waiver with a managed care structure for the 60+ population who meet that nursing facility level of care. So if you hear those kind of letters and numbers, the game of bingo, that's kind of we're not calling out bingo cards. We are talking about waivers. So although I do love bingo, I will say, just love a good bingo game. So when we're thinking about our timeline, we are near Thanksgiving, which hopefully you will have all purchased your turkeys. And if you haven't yet, you're running out of time. But based on this timeline, we are out for public comment currently on pretty much almost nearly all of the waivers that FSSA administers. So the family supports waiver, the community integration and habilitation waiver, the traumatic brain injury waiver, and the age and disabled waiver, which will transition to the health and wellness waiver come next summer. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the nature of some of these changes, some of the things you could be looking at as far as substantive changes in those amendments. I'm going to talk through those with you all this morning, as well as just some logistical information to kind of help level set for folks, particularly if you're listening in the live stream and kind of want more information or are trying to familiarize yourself with what's happening, because there's a lot going on. And so I'm just kind of keeping you guys as apprised as we can. If there are other avenues in this public comment period that would be helpful for us to get in front of folks and just receive public comment, we can talk about what those might look like, and you're free to reach out to me and I can help kind of see if we can coordinate any additional opportunities. But this timeline just reflects kind of where we are. It also recognizes, we have another amendment already kind of in our wings. In the course of the next year, we will be looking to submit a subsequent amendment about a year from now, actually, where we are trying to implement some additional changes across our waivers, particularly as it relates to the expansion of self-directed services. And so just flagging that for you to know that these are kind of iterative, evolving amendments with changes that are being kind of staged out based on how we can implement things, but also priorities of stakeholders based on a lot of the waiver redesign stakeholder feedback that we have gotten. So hopefully that timeline makes sense, and that their little red arrow just as a continual reminder of, if you're following along, kind of where we are. So in order for us to make changes to our waivers, we do have to post things for public comment for at least 30 days. There is a tribal group in Indiana, so we also offer tribal comment period to those populations. We actually have a public comment period from November 8th to December 14th, recognizing this is a busy time for everybody. And I know that you all will be printing out all of the waiver drafts during your Thanksgiving and reading them all during all of your downtime that you're having. Of course, I'm kidding. We don't expect you to necessarily do that unless you're super just curious. But we'll touch on a lot of the major substantive pieces here, but also kind of clarify what you might see when you're looking at these amendments, just so you can understand. Also, I will just say, during the public comment, we receive a lot of feedback. We don't always respond immediately to that feedback or say, oh, you don't like this, or this doesn't sound right, we're going to change it. We normally wait until the end of that public comment period where we can kind of synthesize everybody's feedback and get a good picture of the landscape of what folks are saying about the amendment package. So don't be offended if we don't immediately say, oh, yes, we heard you, or responding to that. What we typically will do is provide a summary of the public comment back out to everybody after the public comment period closes and we get to that submission to our federal partners at CMS. We also have to share a summary of that public comment with our federal partners at CMS as well, so they will also see what folks have had to say about the amendment package, things that we're proposing to change, and any concerns or hopefully endorsements of things that we're doing. We do like positive comments too, those do count. And anything that is concerning to folks, we also weigh heavily in terms of whether or not we need to make changes to those amendments before we submit them to CMS. So again, just as a reminder, none of these changes are proposed to take effect until next summer, July of 2024. This is the package of amendments that will include the 2% annual rate indexing that we did not include in the previous set of amendments in order to kind of get those approved more quickly and implemented as an immediate kind of need for providers in the DSP wage recognition there. You're going to see language alignment across amendments, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but there are places where nothing substantive is changing. We're just trying to say things in the same way so that we're not confusing to folks. In terms of operations, there may not be any operational changes. We're just trying to say the same thing in the waiver amendments, and a recognition that it's one division that's going to be operating and administering the waivers come July going forward. So hopefully that makes sense, but I'll touch on that a little bit as we go through the different amendments. And as I said, I'm not going to focus highly on pathways for the purposes of this group, recognizing you're primarily probably interested in those waivers that are already with DDRS and the waivers that are coming to DDRS next summer.
Hey, Kathy, real quick, Katie had I just want to, before you continue, she said, when we refer to waiver reset, are you, just to clarify, are you talking about the waiver amendment that is currently out for public comment, correct? Or can you just clarify when you say waiver reset?
Yeah, so I think it's two probably separate things, to be fair. So the waivers that are currently out for public comment really kind of reflect the current, I think, strategy for waiver redesign, which really has been that progressive progress improvement approach where we're making iterative changes over time to the waivers that we administer, and it feels a lot more like tweaking those waivers that we administer so that we can make minor adjustments as we go along. And as we get into kind of this discussion about what waiver reset is, that's really kind of taking a more wholesale approach to regrouping and resetting the waivers that are being administered at that point. And I think that's a much longer runway. So multiple years down the road, looking at, okay, now that we have multiple populations being supported in a single division, what additional ways can we coordinate the waivers in a manner that really kind of responds to that really consistent stakeholder feedback about how people are not necessarily feeling supported across waivers, depending on their various needs and challenges based, looking at that as a holistic picture and saying we need to probably stop tinkering and really take a more holistic approach to restructuring things that really fit the different types of services and supports and populations that we're trying to support. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'll start with the family supports waiver. Just as an FYI, I'm just covering what we feel like are the major changes that we're making to these amendments at this point in time. And so a lot of these you've heard about because we've talked about them whenever we let Kyle talk at the advisory meetings. He has also mentioned these. But what we have really is the first phase of the employment, the systems transformation plan is really kind of being represented here, which is modifying future entry of transition age individuals in that facility pre-voc service, and recognition that we are moving down that path. And this is the first step down that path, as you all recall, in that multi-year plan. You'll also see some changes represented around employment in the case management service definition and the behavior support services definition. This is, if you'll recall, many years ago. Actually, it was probably earlier this year. We had some work groups that we had assembled where we were talking about different areas of the system as it relates to supporting competitive integrated employment. And the shared outcomes group really looked at the case management service and the behavior support services service. And we also talked to case managers as well as behavior support service providers and said, what is working well in this space today as it relates to supporting individuals in talking about employment. And they gave us some feedback in terms of maybe some things that they currently do as part of their role in either the case management service or the behavior support service service. And so you'll see some of where we're just calling out, not necessarily saying there's a new service here, but just here are ways in which your case manager may be able to support you in talking about employment, or ways that they could help connect you to other resources and supports. And really, it's just us saying there is a lane for these services to help in that employment conversation. What you will see over the course of time is we will start doing this with other services as well, where we will start calling out the employment aspect of that service and how that particular service contributes to, or could contribute to, somebody's competitive integrated employment goals. So those are just some language changes there. Would appreciate feedback or thoughts on how those are framed in terms of how, is it clear to people what we're trying to articulate there? Again, just really trying to put a finer point on these services have a lane and have a purpose and a role as it relates to employment. And we're trying to just recognize that for individuals and families who are looking at that service and understanding how they may be able to contribute to that overall outcome. A couple of new services, again, the career exploration and planning service that Kyle has talked about, that really is targeted to that transition age group that we are affecting in that change to the pre-vocational service. And the home modification assessment, that really was a result of some input from folks around the current maybe issues with the home mod service on the family support waiver and the community integration and habilitation waiver, where maybe that assessment might be beneficial to have in the course of getting home mods, and recognition also that it exists in other waivers, and this is an area that we can reach some alignment across the service, the waivers. And so where we could realize some of those alignment areas, we went ahead and tried to implement. We're going to go ahead and try to implement those things. So, and thank you, Karen, for that. I was actually pulled aside by Carolyn, who was like, she almost hugged me. It was really dramatic. She was very excited about this home mod assessment thing. And I must have been like in a room overhearing her. She thought maybe I had her phone tapped or something, but
I think from case management, that is probably one, we're not experts, right? And families have a quick to say, yeah, we're good. And we're like, you're not good, because they didn't do what they're supposed to do. And this is, I think, and we see this, the A&D waiver has this, and that helps. It doesn't make it perfect, but it will sure help make sure we're doing this right the first time with those limited dollars. So we're amazingly happy, because I believe some of your staff are currently involved in some of those conflicts that are currently.
Yes,
which
they are.
Pretty, when you have such a limited amount of money to work with.
Yeah, and the other part of this that I'll just also add, because I also think this is another element of the assessment, is that part of this, the way that we structured this, was that there was a delineation of responsibilities, and so that the entity doing the assessment is not the entity doing the home modification. And so there was an effort there to try to create some differentiation of roles, so to create some natural maybe checks and balances there that really are not exactly in play today the way that they probably should be. So thanks for that feedback. Next slide. So, a surprise, a lot of the same changes on the community integration and habilitation waiver. Again, a lot of these changes are in recognition of the Employment Services Transformation Plan, also in recognition of past stakeholder input and conversations around maybe what's working and what's not. This will also have, again, the home modification assessment included as a part of this waiver as well, with the same kind of role delineation for assessment versus who's actually performing the home mod for the individual. So I won't spend a lot of additional time here, just recognizing a lot of the same changes that we've made on the family support waiver are going to be represented on the CIH's waiver as well. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the health and wellness waiver and the traumatic brain injury waiver. But I want to start here because this is probably where we're getting the majority of emergent, or maybe I'll call them somewhat frantic questions about what's happening and what's not happening. And so really not a lot is changing as it relates to these waivers, other than that operational shift to the Bureau of Disability Services. And so we're not asking the providers that are currently providing services on these waivers, we're not asking them to do anything at this time. In fact, they really don't need to do anything. They don't need to re-enroll. They don't need to reach out to us. Please actually don't reach out to us right now. In that you don't really need to re-enroll or do anything to re-engage or ensure that this service continuity on either of those waivers. We're not changing any of the eligibility criteria or process for that as the way it sets today and the way it operates today. We're not changing any of the IT systems as much as we would like to. We are not changing any of the IT systems, recognizing it's just too much at one time to actually do well. And we also need to better understand the longer term kind of vision and planning across that waiver reset discussion to really kind of have a path forward. So that's just a call out to say to folks, your service budgets are not changing, your care or case management is not changing. Unless you want to change, you do not have to change. All of these things are should continue as they are today. So very much on rails, and we're not trying to stop any of those current kind of things from continuing to happen at that kind of switch or go live next summer. I think the BEADS team does work closely with Division of Aging already. However, there will be a point in the near future where we will start coordinating our email responses to inquiries and questions, just so that we are there. It doesn't feel quite so abrupt at that transition point next summer. So we are also brought into either escalating situations or procedural questions, that we are making sure there is consistency in the answers and approach to that, as well as the Pathways team in Indiana Medicaid, because they also obviously will be operating their Pathways waiver, which is going to look a whole lot like the health and wellness waiver. So we've got a lot of coordination internally that we are also planning to execute to make sure that folks are getting consistent responses and feedback from us at that transition point. But I'll talk really quickly about the traumatic brain injury waiver and the health and wellness waiver here. So a couple of things we're just calling out. Obviously, we're gonna be the entity. The Bureau of Disability Services under DDRS will be the entity administering these waivers after go live in July of 2024. There's a couple of adjustments that have been made in these amendments. Again, we added home modification assessment to the TBI, just again for that consistency across our waivers. We also added structured family caregiving to the traumatic brain injury waiver, and that was in coordination with a lot of stakeholder feedback from the TBI community and the individuals that we've met with over the course of the last year, and just making them aware of this waiver transition. There's some other things that I think the folks on that waiver would like to see, just like we all would in terms of service array, capacity, and all of that fun stuff. But we'll be working with them, obviously, to kind of bring them into the fold of everything that's going on within our division, and trying to incorporate their feedback and have them at the table for future conversations as it relates to long-term waiver kind of redesign, reset planning efforts. We also have a need to designate paid family care allowances. And so this is specifically where legally responsible individuals are being paid to provide care in those situations where they are being paid to provide care to their minor children or their spouse. So we did not previously have this clearly delineated in either the TBI waiver or the A&D waiver. So you'll see us just provide a description here based on CMS's requirements that we do that. So we would be looking for any feedback or thoughts on how we have defined what really CMS calls extraordinary care, which would be those situations where it makes sense or is appropriate for the family, the parents, to provide the paid care to their minor child. And there's a lot of different situations where that would make sense and that would be appropriate for them to be in that situation and being the paid caregiver. But just noting that is a change. Similar to the health and wellness waiver, just as a reminder, the budgets will follow the individuals. We've had some questions, people asking if they're going to have their service array budget's going to have to fit into the BEADS budget, and it's not. It's their money follows them. It travels with them on their waiver. The services will continue as authorized, so there's no interruption of service, no requirement that authorizations end and then start again in July. Those things are just all going to continue to operate as they are set to operate today. So we also, again, added the paid family caregiving allowance information there to, one, ensure that continues to be allowable and that we have complied with the CMS kind of expectation that we define that extraordinary care piece. That's primarily it, other than I just want to make sure that everybody is clear for the health and wellness waiver. There is a transition point, right? At that point at which individual turns 60, they transition then to pathways. And so this is where the health and wellness waiver really needs to have some consistency with that pathways waiver so that folks don't feel like that transition it puts them in a completely different boat in a completely different set of services and feels very disruptive. So you'll see a lot of alignment across the health and wellness and the pathways waiver, just in recognition that there is that connectivity. And then we as an agency are looking at and being mindful of those transitions, recognizing that we're going to have a constant sort of flux of folks who are reaching that age point who need to transition. And we'll be identifying some processes and procedures to implement that, just to ensure that people have plenty of notification, plenty of talk and conversation and prompts of getting them to that point of transitioning to pathways. And so as we have more information about that, I'll be sure to be talking through that with you all, and Holly, and we'll be doing that as well. So just as a reminder, you have until December 14th, and our waiver docs are already out there for review. We've had one virtual session that was, I think, yesterday. We'll have 3 additional sessions in the month of November for stakeholders to kind of hear this similar information, understand what the public comment process is, how they can provide public comment, where to go to do that, and where they can find information about these changes. and also see this high level overview of what it is that we're proposing to do. We've kind of bifurcated the sessions. So the first couple sessions are really specific to pathways. And that really is to highlight for that key population, who is the population who will be moving from one waiver to another, right? So that's the target group that we want to make sure they are very clearly aware that there is an action on their part that they should be looking to take in the coming months to choose a managed care entity and choose where kind of their path as they transition to that waiver. Obviously, if they don't choose, we will select for them, but we would really obviously prefer them to take that action and have the control over that choice at that transition point. So that's a piece of a transition element that we'll be looking at as part of the overall PR campaign and strategy to inform this population about that choice. We'll be submitting these in mid-January. That gives CMS quite a bit of time to review all of these amendments, and it is in recognition that this is the most these are the most waivers we've ever submitted at one time to CMS, and so that's like maybe a waiver a month for them to review. They have had an opportunity to look at these waivers already. They've had about a month with them to review in their draft form and to answer any questions, that preliminary questions that they might have. So they've already had an opportunity to have a bit of a informal peek at what we're proposing to do. We've already had some question and answer discussions with them about what we're looking to implement and to address any kind of concerns they might have. So these are the next set of sessions that we have coming up. There was an announcement that we did send out with all of the links to these for folks who want to join. As I said, I think we also, we try to do as much outreach during this time period to make folks aware, recognizing it is a public comment period. So again, that kind of immediate response or immediate like feedback of what we're changing and what we're not is likely not going to be happening for folks, but they will at least have the opportunity to weigh in and tell us what they think, what they like, what they don't like. We'll have one coming up on the 20th, another one on the 21st, which is just specific to the waiver transition. So that's not going to talk about pathways on the 21st. So if you just want to know what BEADS is going to be doing, then you would tune into that one. The 29th is really a joint session that talks about pathways and all of the other waivers that are going to be under review and are out for public comment. So these are virtual sessions in order to try to get information to folks in a way that they can digest it, recognizing those amendments are a lot to read and review. When looking at the documents themselves, there is a section called Purpose of Amendment. It's in the very beginning of the waivers, and that generally contains all of these substantive pieces of changes that we are looking to make. So that can also kind of help direct you where you want to look within the waivers to really kind of get to the nuts and bolts of what some of those substantive changes look like. And as a reminder, there's just a lot of language changes. We did a lot of language cleanup because we are really great at saying the same thing 3 or 4 different ways. And so what we're trying to do is correct that going forward and hopefully reduce confusion for our participants. And when they see things represented, it's represented the same way in every waiver. So I'm sure there may have been places where we missed that, and I'm sure there are stakeholders who will see it and tell us about it. And we will take that information under consideration and probably fix it. So we do look at the public comment, and we do really appreciate the level of feedback that we do get during these opportunities because it has affected how the amendments have been subsequently submitted to CMS. We have made changes based on the public comment in the past. So we do really look to that to help us. This is like a term paper, and after a while you don't see it anymore, and you need somebody to kind of help with a different set of eyes to take a look at things. So that's part of this process as well. So I'll pause and see if there are any, I think that was my last slide, to see if there's any questions.
I can't figure, this is Karen. I can't figure out how to raise my hand right now on my little thing. So I'm raising my hand here. I'm good. So as we think about this transition next July, I just am curious, Kathy, what you guys think is probably the biggest challenge that faces us. And then what can this committee do, or what can we do, or what do you think would help that we as this committee can do? Because sometimes I feel like we, and I've sat in some meetings where they're like, well, this committee is supposed to be helping redesign, and then I don't know that I feel like we're doing that. I think we're sounding board, we hear, but so it's two parts. One is, what do you think is the biggest challenge of all this? Because that's a lot of moving parts, right? But then also, what should we be doing? So there you go. Big questions, Kathy. Go for it.
I mean, first and foremost, thoughts and prayers. I mean, those are always helpful. I think I guess as we're looking at it, I think there are some key pieces, and I know, no surprise, Karen, case management is one of them. I think we recognize that where there is differentiation that we are not necessarily changing at this moment, that is where operationally we're going to be looking at to see where are those friction points and where are those points of abrasion that we probably are going to try to need to work to reconcile both short-term and long-term. I think that's an area where we know, obviously we've made massive changes in beads and the way that case management is structured, and we see the care management approach for the A&D and TBI just looks very different. And we got to talk about that, I think, in a way that helps us all move forward collectively in a way that benefits the individuals that we're supporting. And so I think that's an area for sure. I know I saw your note about IT systems. It is another piece of this that I think for us, where you all know we worked, Beads, Holly, and that team worked really hard to get out of an old system and to try to get further into hey, let's just have one system. And now we're going to be working in CAMS and the Beads portal and our team anyway, in terms of administering those other waivers. And so that's an area that's kind of high on our priority list, and talking through when does it make sense to reconcile those pieces as well. And I think just trying to, you all are really great sounding board, but also you'll hear things that we do not hear. And giving us that feedback is really helpful in us trying to address misconceptions or misunderstandings, or just that proverbial rumor mill, which works way better than any listserv announcement that we can push out. So if there are ways that we can hear that feedback from you all, either in these sessions or an email or a conversation to let us know this is what's happening, I don't think this is what you intended, and for us to kind of be able to mobilize and figure out how to, because I think there's just going to be some, as much as we're trying to make no disruption here, I think even just having a different entity administering the waivers is going to probably look and feel a little different, because they're going to hear from us a lot more than they are seemingly used to hearing from us, and my just limited time and doing some stakeholder engagement with the folks on those waivers. I think they welcome it. I think they want to be in those conversations. I have heard overwhelmingly they appreciate that. But it's also just an adjustment of understanding kind of how to, you all know how to come to the table and have those discussions. And if you've not had the opportunity to do that, it can just be a bit of a different look and feel. So really kind of making sure that we are hearing that feedback and course correcting it as we're able to would be really helpful.
Yeah, Kathy, I would just echo that last sentiment. I think really being a voice for those you represent, there will continue, no matter how much we communicate, to be some confusion and concern around this transition. And I think just helping us, one, deliver the appropriate message, but two, amplify for us what you're hearing. And then, as you stated earlier, just that willingness to continue to come to the table and engage with us as we move beyond that initial transition. So there will be opportunities to be a part of that. So, and my apologies, I let Kathy and Jessica know I've lost power and internet, so I'm now on my cell phone.
Well, and I
So
appreciate that. I mean, we serve across all those waivers and just kind of watching how very different they are. And absolutely, care and case management are night and day, especially now. And just watching how that's rolling. And my staff don't always appreciate how I describe them, but it's the truth. And we try to parallel all of that in quality, but it's hard when you don't have a system that allows you to pull reports and make sure things are being done the way they are supposed to be done. At least on what you can quantitatively look at. The person-centered part of it, of course, you can't do in a report you can pull, but you can at least make sure that the I's are being dotted and the T's are being crossed and all the requirements of the program are being done. So not to ever look past the individual and the importance of the person-centered part of it, but that is a struggle in that program. So but there's a lot going on in that space right now, to say the least. So appreciate that.
Yeah, so no, we'll continue to provide updates on the progression of our plan and where we're headed, both as it relates to this package of amendments, but also the broader kind of multi-year kind of approach and engagement on the waiver reset as we start to bring in, again, getting these additional populations under the DDRS umbrella and really creating some visibility there that we don't necessarily have today, and understanding kind of what the needs of those folks are as well for our planning purposes going forward. And then I'm just going to add a random additional element here because I have you all. It does relate to all of the waivers that we administer, and it is the just reminder that the EVV edits did go live today. So as an FYI, I know that we've been having conversations with providers and stakeholders about the full kind of implementation of EVV and working down that pathway. But if you're hearing from people, issues, concerns, please reach out to us so that we can kind of help navigate them toward where they need to be in order to get their issues resolved, or any TA or guidance that we can offer in the course of flipping that switch. I won't go into all of the EVV technical pieces for the sake of everyone's sanity today, but that's just as an FYI, just a reminder. I wanted to throw that out for folks while we were on today. I think that's all I have. If there's any other questions, just let me know.
Thanks, Kathy. One of these days I'm going to play Mrs. Robinson when she's done, and she's going to get embarrassed, but okay. Kyle, if you want to, I left you plenty of time, so
yeah. Well, good morning, DDRS Advisory Council members. We wanted to take just a little bit of time today to update you all on some of our accomplishments in the systems transformation plan to date, let you kind of know where some of our priorities are for phase 1 activities. As a reminder, there are multiple phases to this plan. The first phase is intended to run for about 12 months. The second phase is intended to run after that for about 6 to 8 months as well. And so in January of next year, so January of 2024, when we meet again excuse me, we will be able to share some updates about what we're going to share today, but also talk a little bit about what our priorities are for that phase 2 of our work in employment systems transformation. So Jessica, if we can go to the first content slide. So as you remember, we've organized that plan into kind of 5 categories. The first one is around enhancing data strategies, and a couple of the things that we have done to date in this phase of that work I want to talk about. The first is the facility and community-based services for rehabilitation and pre-vocational services. We updated the guidance and changed the modifiers for how providers bill for those services so that we can track where that service is occurring. Before we did that, we didn't have a really good way of identifying the division of service delivery for those 2 services. It's a critical piece for us to be able to watch as our providers transition away from facility-based pre-vocational services in the next 4 years or so, watching where individuals land and watching changes in utilization for those settings for those 2 services. The data is starting to come in, but it's not mature yet because of delay in billing. That billing period, there's not a full data set, but we anticipate having that full data set starting at the start of next year. And so we'll then be able to share some of those initial findings and maybe set a benchmark for our work with the council next year. The other thing that we identified pretty early on in our planning for this transformation work was the need to hire and find a kind of embedded across the division lead for our data analytics work. We have been working through that. We've been defining that role. We've been working with our hiring folks to get that job posted. I'll pause here to see if Kathy or Kelly want to jump in and update about where we are on that. And
Are you thinking the position, Kyle? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what we could really say at this point.
Yeah, so we don't have, we're close, I guess I would say, to having that position filled. So that should be hopefully before the end of the year.
Yeah. So once we have that position, oh, Kelly.
No, I was just going to echo that. We've completed the interview process. We've extended an offer, but we have to see if all of that walks through. So we would anticipate by close of calendar year.
So we are hoping that we are nearing the end of that process to identify and bring someone on board. Once we do have that person on board, there's a number of things that we are prioritizing that they take a lead role in coordinating for us, including some work around crosswalking our division data sets and even other FSSA and state data program data sets, helping us fine tune and finalize our data collection and monitoring strategies around competitive integrated employment. So we've had a lot of feedback from individuals, families, providers, and other partners on the kinds of data that we'd want to track to measure our performance and measure our success in this transformation work. Some of that data we are collecting now. Other pieces of that data might be part of a provider data system, or they might not be even really collected in any meaningful way across the division right now. So part of the work that we're hoping this individual to do is help us define and really formalize some of those strategies so that we have a much fuller picture of the kinds of things that are happening beyond really, the just account of the number of folks that are working or their wages. There's lots of other pieces to this work and to the employment question that we want to really dig into. And finally, working on really starting the conversation around requirements gathering for any enhancements in the future that we might want to do to our data systems. both in terms of their own operability, but even how they can talk across DDRS programs. With that, we'll move to the next topic. Really, Kathy did a great job kind of talking through some of the work that's been done to date and refocusing our waivers on employment. Our first crack at that is the amendment that is currently out for public comment. Remember, we are adding some changes to the case management and behavioral supports to really highlight the role that they have to play in supporting someone on their employment journey. And we are adding that new service that is right now targeted at transition age youth, that career exploration that is giving folks a chance to have a conversation, explore, make an informed choice about if they want to pursue community employment. That service is kind of intended to sit between school transition program work and really what VR does with full discovery. So it's intended for folks who may not have had that conversation, or they want to continue that conversation after they have left their transition period and they've transitioned into adulthood. Also, I just want to again reiterate and clarify for folks, because there has been some confusion even with some of our providers and families, that the halt to transition age youth new entries for facility-based pre-vocational services that is part of this amendment, again, it only impacts folks who are not utilizing that service at the effective date. So if someone is before July 2024 receiving facility-based pre-vocational services, they are transition age youth, they're receiving those before July 2024, they can continue to receive those. We are just turning off the opportunity for new entries into that service and that setting after July 2024. As Kathy mentioned, those are live for public comment until December 14th of this year. And then once we have, as we are working through the public comment period for this, it's really incumbent for us to start the process of developing and drafting and fine-tuning that full set of waiver employment service changes that are intended for the next amendment. Remember, Kathy kind of walked through the next set of amendments, which includes a focus on self-direction. The full set of waiver service improvements will be part of that self-direction amendment. That is, again, targeted for a July 2025 effective date. And so it's really critical that we start now working with our partners, working with individuals and families to engage in the development of those changes, because we have a target public comment period in Q2 of 2024. So we are starting the drafting process now, and we'll work with our BEAD staff to devise a plan for stakeholder engagement during that drafting phase. And then the last thing I want to mention here, a priority that's upcoming for us, is that there's a recognition in part from some of the stakeholder engagement that we have done, and in part based on some of the advice and feedback given from this body, is that there's a need to build upon that career exploration work that we're doing, which should result in sort of a strengths-based profile of that individual after they receive that career exploration service. We want to build upon that profile and really expand that into a fuller community employment career planning tool. And so that we hope that planning tool will be used by individuals and families in both waiver services and VR. It can be used to inform employment goals. It can be used to even in a transition program. And it's really designed to be person-centered and create a kind of a person-centered, a more robust person-centered service planning work for providers and state staff to reflect upon. And so in one of our next priorities moving even into phase 2 is the development of those career planning tools and some guidance for staff on how to use those.
Kyle, Rick has a question.
Yeah, thanks for, I can't monitor the chat.
No, I know it's hard. I know.
That.
He says, I know the career exploration service is targeted to transition age individuals, but will there be an opportunity for individuals outside of that age group to receive that service? I know there are many individuals outside of that age group who have had little to no experience in career exploration activities.
Yeah, Rick, I really appreciate that question. I think it's a really important one. We are targeting the career exploration initially to kind of map onto the populations that we are phasing out for new entries. And so right now it's really targeted at transition age youth. However, as you mentioned, there are lots of other folks and lots of other services who have not had opportunities for these kinds of conversations. And so I think long-term, the goal is that this becomes a service that is available to anyone who really hasn't had that conversation, doesn't have clear career goals, needs something that helps them make an informed choice about exploring competitive integrated employment. So long-term, I think the goal is to have that be expanded to anyone on the waiver. Thanks for the question. So the next bucket really is around supporting individuals and families. A couple of our phase 1 activities that we have completed include our individual and family listening sessions. We are working right now to get that report, the report completed and in a state that can be published to our website and distributed. We're working with FSSA Comms and with our vendor to finalize that. But I'd like to share some insights that we've gotten from those listening sessions as a kind of a preview. So some of the things that were shared insights from both the individual and family discussions that our contractor had were a need to really beef up our use of consistent person-centered planning work. That also includes invitations or opportunities to explore non-paid natural supports and build those into that planning. Additionally, there's an opportunity, to have employment conversations differently with individuals and families. Some of that work is already really being demonstrated and tested in our seamless transition pilot work, which I'll talk about in a minute. But there were examples from our listening sessions of early resistance from families and individuals to a conversation around employment. That resistance during the course of those sessions really identified some fears, and the work that was done in those conversations moved folks from sort of a resistance to an interest in it, given the right supports and the right coordination among state systems. So we are really excited to be able to kind of take that information and start to build that into our programming, how we have an employment conversation differently with individuals and families. And finally, we identified a need really to communicate with individuals and families around proposed waiver changes and how to utilize new service opportunities. So we will be doing that, as you see, upcoming next in our phase 1 activities includes the development of a comprehensive communication plan on our competitive integrated employment efforts. I also want to update everyone on some changes to our career counseling information referral contract that was done this year. That contract term now runs from July 2023 to June of 2025. One of the main things that was done in that new contract was an emphasis and a shift to one-on-one delivery of that CCIR as the expected or primary way that occurs. And DDRS is monitoring those monthly reportings on CCIR activities since the new contract period. Additionally, I just want to mention quickly that we will begin some conversations around how to include benefits counseling as part of that full waiver employment service array that was identified and continually comes up as a key barrier to individuals and families having a meaningful conversation or exploring community employment. So that is one of our key priorities for that full waiver employment service array. Our fourth kind of bucket is around building provider capacity. There's been a lot of work to date in this bucket, including our employment collaboratives work, our innovation pilot project work. Those are ongoing and will run through really March of 2025. I also wanted to highlight a couple of other pieces that are not quite as large, but certainly we're excited about the early feedback from these. So Indiana joined, I believe, in 2022. We rejoined the State Employment Leadership Network, which is a kind of multi-state collaborative around competitive integrated employment improvements for the DD service system. For those of you who don't know, that is a kind of a joint effort between NASDs and ICI at UMass Boston. Part of that membership includes access to e-learning courses that are specifically designed around conversations and targeted at case managers, learning some kind of foundational information around competitive integrated employment. So we have begun to offer a certain number of slots to each case management organization, and they have been utilizing those slots to support case managers and I believe even some supervisors. The feedback that we've gotten from case managers as we've talked to them after they've completed that is that it really helps clarify their role around competitive integrated employment and also gives them some new tools for having those discussions with individuals and with their support team differently than maybe what they have done to date. And so what we're doing now is really exploring, we're taking in that feedback. We're going to continue to offer those slots to case managers as we have new slots to provide in each year of our participation in SELN. But we're also looking at how to formalize that training and really get that into the hands of all case managers, because it's a pretty limited set of slots that we're able to give out each year. So we're really hoping to be able to figure out a way to get this information into the hands of all of our case managers, because at least from our perspective, the feedback from those case managers has been overwhelmingly positive. That it's not only is it a really well put together training, it is self-directed, so folks can do it as they've got time available. But the content itself is really shifting some mindsets and providing them with new tools. Additionally, I want to talk about the seamless transition pilots. So if you remember, we're really doing a very limited pilot effort in school transition programs. The primary goal of those seamless transition pilots is just for us as DDRS in partnership with the Department of Education to test and observe a more coordinated approach to transition programming and transition planning. We want folks who are in school transition programs, including and particularly folks who have higher support needs, who might be tracked into a non-work kind of support structure at the school. We want them to have access to real work-based learning and real opportunities to check out and try out employment settings to consider community employment. What we're doing with that, we have 2 pilots that we have fully completed, and then another 2 that we are currently engaged with in Ripley, Dearborn, and Ohio counties that right now. So we are working with that school system right there near Cincinnati, currently delivering those pilots. there's kind of two main components to that pilot. It's really around building capacity for the transition staff and the VR staff, the pre-ETS provider, the community rehab provider, when they're invited to sit around a table and really coordinate services that expand and augment and really improve an individual's access to community-based work experiences or work. So we have been doing that. The two components of that really are 2 on-site visits that our vendor does, where they go in and model a way of engaging with individuals and families around a profile and identifying interests, strengths, and kind of career goals. And then a second on-site, which is really modeling and then providing feedback on how you engage with employers differently. We're really excited about the early outcomes of those in terms of building capacity in the school transition staff, but also in terms of how it helps to solidify the relationship between school transition programs and VR in a much clearer way. As part of that, we are also offering webinars around work-based learning and community employment that really they're modified, but they map onto the content that's being delivered in those seamless transition pilots. We offered the first one in the fall of this year that was really targeted at school transition program staff. We'll offer that webinar again in really early 2024. We're expanding the target group for that webinar to include VR counselors and case managers, as well as school transition staff. So we'll have more to share here next month about the timing for that, and we'll get that out to our stakeholders to share with interested individuals. Finally, we're going to work, our priorities that are upcoming include improving our quality metrics for case managers and employment professionals, and completing the 4 additional seamless transition pilot sites. And then, you can advance the slides, Jessica. Finally, the last category of our transformation work is around aligning state programs. Teresa has already kind of shared about the value-based payment work that was being done, the incentive work that's being done in VR employment services. We're also really excited to track and watch the VR supported employment project that was secured by VR. Watch that over the next 5 years. We've also engaged in a cross-bureau record sharing work group between BEADS, a waiver, and VR programs to be able to facilitate a much better handoff and a much more efficient handoff of records between those programs when there's an individual in a shared situation. And we also held our first cross-council employment first summit in August of this year. Had really excellent turnout from a number of different advisory councils across the state, not just ones that are specific to disability. We also had individuals representing the state's Advisory Council on Special Education, representing the regional workforce boards, representing the Commission on Higher Education, and the Civil Rights Commission, representing the Governor's Council, IIDC, and Indiana Disability Rights. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some others, but we had a really great turnout, and there's an open invitation to those councils for us to engage with them on planning around how they can be involved with Employment First, and how they can be involved with sort of a coordination of services across the state. Up next for that phase really is a chance for us to evaluate and fine-tune agency MOUs that might need to be reevaluated in light of some of our priorities around competitive integrated employment. And finally, really establishing an internal task group of FSSA folks to address any competitive integrated employment barriers that are identified as part of our work. And we've already started to kind of build a list of potential topics for us to discuss. But our priority now is to actually form that task group and begin that work. So I'll pause to see if there is any additional questions or comments. I know I kind of ran through a lot. As a reminder, we'll be able to update more on this work in January, including previewing our priorities for phase 2 moving into next year.
Thanks, Kyle. And reiterate, Kelly just had a chat about excellent work, and I'll second, third, and fourth that for your leadership in this space. I don't see any questions.
No, I would just say we've gotten lots of great feedback about those that have participated so far in case management, just real positive that so far what they've seen and just really helping kind of, again, keep gearing the mindset, right? It's just kind of interesting what I thought people understood and what they get. I'm sure Kyle's like, no kidding, Karen, but I feel like that seems common sense to me, but I guess it's not always, and it's been surprising to me. So it's been good conversations for sure. So thank you for your leadership on that.
Well, and we appreciate the engagement from the case management organizations, particularly, and really leveraging those slots. I believe we have a pretty close to 100% completion rate for those. There might be one or two that didn't finish that e-learning course, but I think it's a really accessible way for us to support case managers, no matter where they are on their experience and their knowledge base. So I think the next question is really figuring out how do we really embed this within our training, either from the state or from the case management angle. So thanks for that comment, Karen.
That's good. Okay, let me double check real quick. I don't see anything else. Okay, Kyle, hopefully that was enough time. You were right on track. We didn't have to cut you off or anything this time, but okay, just a couple things with scheduling. As you guys know, we are not meeting in December. So here is the quick schedule out for the next year for 2024. Virtual, some in-person. It was kind of strange how it was working out. We ended up not being able to find a room in November. I was hoping November would be in person, but we weren't able to find a room to hold all of us in the government center, which is strange. It's okay, you're off. But anyway, so I did a little playing around with this. For the members you do have an invite. I had to send separate invites because there's not really a particular cadence with this because we are off some of the months. So let me know if you need the invite again. It has this Zoom link. I'm happy to resend that. A couple things that we're going to touch on in January. Heather Dane will present some information on the work we're doing around self-direction and give you guys some updates. And I'll present some additional information around and updates on the innovation pilot projects and where we're headed or where those are standing. We're about a year and about 14 months away from the end of from 2025, from March. So give you some updates on those. If there's anything else that you guys would be helpful to share, please feel free to email me, especially since we're not meeting until January, and we can get that on the schedule to talk about. Anything else? And again, this is being live streamed so on our YouTube channel. And so if folks need to go back, please share that with the public as well in case they are not seeing it. Yeah, hey, Sean.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. Yeah. I just want to say that I'm glad I don't live in Texas, because at the conference in New Orleans, when I was at the symposium, the Self-Advocate Symposium, there was a lady that was talking, and she was telling everybody that in Texas, they have 100,000+ people on their waiting list to get services. And she said in the same sentence that there have been people that have died waiting to get on a waiver.
Oh,
So-
Sean, you reminded me, actually, you don't know this, maybe you do, but I was talking to Becky that she was going to talk with you about sharing with the council some of the things that you took away from the conference.
Yeah, that was one of them.
Okay. So I was going to put you on the agenda, like I said, but you're kind
January?
of being voluntold. I don't know, but I was talking to Becky just around when you guys were at that conference, if there were things you and whoever was there too, it wasn't just you, but would want to share from that national conference to the advisory group. I always think it's helpful when we go to conferences to, to share with everyone some of the things you took away, or maybe resources or things that maybe we wouldn't know about. So Becky and I were just on a side chat a couple weeks ago talking about that.
Yeah, so that one was like the biggest eye-opening thing for me, because that was, I thought, to me, that's ridiculous. I don't know about anybody else. It's kind of crazy. But also, we had Kim and I, Noah, Upchurch, and Steve did a session on our Advocacy Fellows program.
Oh, cool.
And so we have gotten, I think Kim said, a dozen or so that from other states that want to either duplicate ours or start or finesse theirs to make it work better.
Awesome.
That's good.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Cool. We'll put together your list for January, okay?
Yeah.
Of other stuff you want to share.
Okay.
Jessica, yeah, if there's nothing else, and I don't want to cut anyone else off. First of all, I just wanted to recognize and compliment you on your leadership of these advisory council meetings. I think over the past few months, they've evolved greatly, and just pleased to see that progress. So thank you so very much for taking over the ownership and leadership of the council in this process. So hats off. Secondly, is we're not going to be meeting in December. I'd like to wish all of you a very happy holiday season. Looking forward to 2024, as has been indicated today and in our prior meeting discussions. 2024 is going to be an extremely busy year with lots of changes and transitions. So we need to continue to work together and strengthen our partnership now more than we ever have. So truly looking forward to all the good things to come in 2024. But just again, Jessica, thank you. These are so very well done. I just even the changes.
Kelly, I want to turn off my camera, because don't embarrass me.
So, well, it's a legitimate and honest compliment. So
it's hard to do virtually. I joke, Sean and I are on the same page there. It's hard to sometimes with these virtually.
Yes,
to like,
it is. It's very challenging.
But I love those videos, and I don't even know if I came up with that. But and Sean, I know you've had some suggestions, so please send if you guys have anything to videos or things like that that you've seen and have resonated with you. Please share them, because I'm happy to share, or even a poem. I mean, anything like that, just to kind of get us started and get us, especially on a positive way, just to start the meeting. So
thank you.
Yeah. So if you guys have any issues with the Zooms or anything, let me know. And this is being live streamed, like I said, so we'll have the tech folks that I'm not a tech person helping us with that. And you can share that live stream that's public. So if anyone the public wants to revisit that on YouTube, they are welcome to. And I echo Kelly's have a great holiday season, and we'll see you in January virtually.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Blessings.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.